Hi, my name is Ashish, and in last video we have seen how to create virtual machine and installing Windows Server 2019 on top of VM. If you haven't subscribed yet, start now by subscribing and clicking the bell so you don't miss anything. Before installing Active Directory, we need to do some basic configurations, and then we'll go for Active Directory installation and configurations. Now we are going to be installing the VirtualBox guest edition on our new server, as well as configuring a static IP address, and we are going to rename our server. So to start, we need to open VirtualBox, and we are going to click on the DC01 VM that we created earlier and click show or click start. I'll pause the video here. Once it loads up, hit right control and delete, or hit input keyboard, insert alt control delete. Okay, so now we just need to type in the password that we have created earlier. Do that now and press enter. And now we will just wait for the desktop to load. The reason why we want to install the VirtualBox guest edition CD image is that it allows us to do things like copy paste between our host computer and our VM, and it also makes this resolution dynamic so that the resolution of our VM will be adapted to whatever the size of this window is. I'm just going to maximize this, and to start the installation we need to go to the devices and insert guest edition CD image, and now we need to scroll down and open the Windows Explorer. It looks like we got a pop-up here, so we are going to say open folder to view files. We just want to run Windows guest edition CD image, so just double click on this application and we are going to proceed with the installation. Now most of these settings will be fine at the default. Click next and install. Now we will get a couple of pop-ups during this installation asking us if we want to install certain drivers and things. We always want to say yes. Make sure that this checkbox always trust Oracle software is checked, and then click install. Okay, so now select I want to manually reboot later, and then click finish. Alright, we are going to close out of this window, and the next thing we are going to do is configure a static IP on our server. So to configure a static IP address, open Server Manager, select local server, and we are going to click down here which says IPv4 version address is assigned by DHCP and its IP version 6 is enabled. So we are going to right click on the Ethernet adapter and click properties, and here we need to uncheck IPv6 version because we are not going to use that, and we are selecting IPv4 option and choose property. Now we are going to say use the following IP address, and then the IP address I usually use .10 is the last octet, but you need to make sure that you set it to the same network is what your NAT network is using. So I'm using 192.168.0.10, and then for the subnet mask we'll leave that default, and the default gateway will be 192.168.0.1, and that's just a IP address of your network itself. Alright, and now we are going to do the preferred DNS server as 127.0.0.1. This may cause issues right now because our server is not actually a domain controller. So the next thing we can do is type in 8.8.8.8, and that is simply a Google DNS server, and this will allow you to reach out to the internet and resolve hostname like google.com and so forth. So we are going to go ahead and click OK, and we will click close and close out of this window. Now the last thing that we need to do is rename the computer. So over here, a computer name, under local server and server manager, we are just going to select this little random generated name here. We will click change, and then for the computer name I am going to call it as DC01. DC because it's my domain controller, and 0 because it's my first domain controller, and I will just click on OK. Alright, so now saying we must restart our computer, that's fine, because we also need to restart for the VirtualBox guest edition. So we are going to get close, and then we are going to say restart now. So let the computer restart, and then we will log back in once it's done. I'm going to go ahead and speed up this video. This is the first reboot, can take a while. We will wait for our computer to come back to the login screen. Okay, so now I'm back to the login screen. Before the screen resizes, we need to log in. So hit right control and delete. I'm typing my administrator password here. Sometimes you also have to resize the screen before it will figure out that it needs to have an adjustment. So now we can see that the resolution is fitting within the window. So if I hit right control and F, I'll be brought into full screen mode, so you can no longer see the file or the VirtualBox option at the top. Instead, you can see these options down here at the bottom. So if I move my cursor down, I can see the same sets of options down here. So it's a little bit easier for you guys to see what I'm doing, and it's a little bit better to close server manager or other things. I'm going to pop out of full screen. Sometimes you exit the VM instead of exiting program like server manager or other something like that. It can be confusing on which X to hit. Alright, I'm going to pop back into full screen by hitting right control and F. And now let's just make sure we are connected to the internet. So the way we are going to do that, it's by opening command prompt. You can also just open Internet Explorer and browse something. We are going to hit the start button and type CMD, and command prompt is going to come up. This is the program that you are going to need to use a lot. So might be worth it to just go ahead and right click and pin it to the taskbar. Okay, so now we have it down here. So if we need to open command prompt, it's really easy to just click it down. Here we are just going to say ping google.com, and we can see we do have a reply from Google. So this VM is now connected on the internet, and it has a static IP address. To check static IP address, type ipconfig. I can see my IP address is 192.168.0.10. So I am good to go with this VM. Now we are going to create a domain controller by installing the Active Directory Domain Services or the ADDS role. Remember that any server running ADDS role is considered a domain controller. So we are going to add this role to our server and create a new domain called adds.com. This is the name of my channel, but you can use any name that you would want, or if you want to keep things simple, you can use adds.com too. Finally, once we add the ADDS role, we'll promote the server as domain controller, and then we'll be done. You should already know how to install server role on the server you currently logged into, but I'm going to cover the steps again. Open Server Manager and select Manage, Add Roles and Feature. On the installation type screen, leave the default option. Role based or feature based checkbox is checked and click Next. Here Microsoft provides you to install roles remotely on other server. If you have more than one server in domain, you can create server group and add your server, and then you can install roles remotely on added server. Right now I have only one server in my environment, so I cannot do that. We will see how to create and add more servers in server pool in some other video. For now I am going with the default server, that is DC01, and click next. In the server role list, choose the Active Directory Domain Services role. You will see a pop-up window stating that you cannot install ADDS unless the following role services or features are also installed. Click the Add Features button and then click Next to proceed for the feature screen. We do not need any additional features as all the required features were already added. Again, click Next. Now you will be brought to the ADDS screen. It tells us that we also need to install the DNS role if we have not already set it up. Click Next and continue on the confirmation screen. Here we can see the roles and feature we are about to install. Click Install and wait for the installation to finish. Once the installation is complete, you will have post-deployment configuration steps that you also need to complete. I'll pause the video here. Once the installation is complete, click the notification flag next to Manage and choose Promote this server to Domain Controller. The configuration wizard will appear giving us three options. The first option, Add Domain Controller to an existing domain, is for adding additional domain controller to domain you have already created. This option is not suitable for us because we have not created a domain yet. The second option, Add a domain to an existing forest, is for adding a child also known as subdomain. Let me elaborate more on this. We are going to create a domain called adds.com. If the domain is already exists, we could create a subdomain or child domain called new.adds.com. And in theory, we could set up this domain called new.adds.com simply to separate our users from administrators who resides in the domain adds.com. You could configure the subdomain. The admins from adds.com domain can reach into the new.adds.com domain and make changes. But the users cannot reach back into the resources of adds.com domain. Again, this is not an appropriate option for us because the adds.com domain does not exist yet. The third option is to add new forest. This will allow us to create and specify a new domain. Choose this option and specify a root domain name. I am going to enter the adds.com and click Next. It will take few seconds before the domain controller option screen appears. So just be patient while processes. The first two options, forest function level and domain function level, specify which operating system the domain controller will use. In my case, it's Windows Server 2016. In Windows Server 2016, there are no new forest or domain function level added in this release. The minimum requirement to add a Windows Server 2019 domain controller is a Windows Server 2008 functional level. The domain also has to use DFSR as the engine to replicate sysvol. Make sure that the domain name or DNS server checkbox is checked. If you remember, when we installed Active Directory Domain Services, it said that we had to install this role in order for the DC to function properly. The global catalog option means that the server will list all the Active Directory objects. This is a requirement for primary domain controller or when we are creating a new domain forest. If you choose read-only domain controller option, then a domain controller will not be able to make changes to the domain. So make sure you do not check this checkbox. Type in DSRM password and make sure that you either write it down or memorize it. The DSRM password allows an administrator to take an instance of AD offline for reason like maintenance or troubleshooting. This is not commonly used, but you want to keep the password just in case. Click Next and proceed on the DNS option on the DNS option screen. You will see a warning about DNS delegation. This warning means that the people on the internet will not be able to resolve local DNS name on your local DNS server. names like adds.com and etc. This is fine because we don't want people on the internet to be able to access our server for several reasons. One of them is security. Number two, we don't want to be using domain that is actually a website and causing issues. Click next and proceed on to the additional options. The NetBIOS name is populated for us is ADDS. The NetBIOS name is an abbreviated version of fully qualified domain name or FQDN, which is adds.com in our case. I am going to leave this default and click continue. On the path screen we can see the default path chosen for the folders that are required by ADDS. If you would like to choose an alternative drive, you can do so by clicking the ... button and choosing an alternative path. I recommend you to leave them at the default setting and click next. Now we are brought to the review option screen where we can see all the options we have chosen so far. If you would like, you can click the view script button and you will be presented with the PowerShell script that you can save in order to later execute and quickly complete the wizard with the same setting we just used. Close out of the PowerShell script and click next. Now we are brought to prerequisites check window. The wizard is now going to verify that the server is ready to promote it as a DC. This will take a few minutes before it is ready, so just be patient while it completes the checks. Once the checks are complete, at the top you will see all the prerequisite checks have passed. If you encounter any error that will not allow you to promote the server as a domain controller, you are going to need to know each area and figure out what's wrong and fix it. Usually these errors are pretty simple to fix. A quick Google will exactly tell you what's wrong and how to fix it. Once you fix the error, click the link that says rerun prerequisite check and wait for the checks to finish again. Under the view result window we can see it. There are various warnings, none of these are critical. The first one is security setting, saying that anything with cryptography not compatible with Windows NT 4.0, which is really old by the way, will be blocked. This is not an issue with us because we are not using old server or old technology. The second is about DNS delegation. Again, we do not care if people on the internet can resolve our DNS record within our network. Click the install button and wait for the installation to complete and the server to reboot. This can take a good while depending on the speed of your server, so you need to be patient while it works. I am going to speed up this video so you don't have to sit here and watch the entire installation. Once the installation completes and the server boots, press right Ctrl Delete to log in. The first thing you will notice is the NetBIOS name of our domain precedes the user account we are logging into. In this case, ADDS /administrator. This is in the form of domain name /domain username. If we had multiple domain, we could specify a different domain by typing in the name of the domain we want to use, followed by / and then the name of the domain user account that we want to log in into. Type in the password and log in. Now our domain controller is completely built. And finally, if you are new here, consider subscribing to this channel and sharing this video with other people that would benefit from this type of content. Here you can see my old videos, how to download and install VirtualBox, how to download Windows Server Operating System 2019, and how to create virtual network for VirtualBox. Thank you.